everyone, and welcome to Rising Stories podcast. I'm Corrine Sandifer, your host. Each week I interview a business owner or author, and we chat about all things business or how they became writers and authors. My guest today is Rebekah Lyons. She is an author who has just released a new book called You Are Free, Be Who You Already Are. Rebekah is a writer and speaker who tells her story about overcoming anxiety and encountering the God of power. I love this conversation with her. She is a wonderful wife and mother living in the Nashville area, and Rebekah and I chatted about all things business, but we also talked about her son's prom and where she shops when she is looking for a blouse or a shirt to wear, because that's what I wanted to know. I hope you enjoy these interviews on Rising Stories. It's my hope that you will be encouraged by listening to these women tell their own stories. So please spread the word about this podcast and tell a friend. Don't forget to find me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm at Corrine Sandifer on both Instagram and on Twitter. Make sure you check out my Instagram because I am giving away a copy of Rebekah's book, You Are Free. More details at the end of this interview, but make sure that you are following me to enter to win. Here is my conversation with Rebekah. Hi, Rebekah.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on Rising Stories.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm honored and excited.
Yeah, I am so thrilled to have you. You have some fans, you have some readers that sent in some questions, so I'm really excited to get into those. Is this your first book that you're about to launch?
This is my second, actually.
Okay.
So some is an operative word. I wrote a book 4 years ago called Free Fall to Fly, and it chronicled my crash and burn moving to New York City. And the Lord's just redemption or rescue in that season. And then Awakened to Calling. I talk a lot about calling and purpose for women in particular. And then it'll be almost 4 years later now that this book is coming out in 12 days called You Are Free.
Tell me about the way that you write. Do you get away and write? I know you're a busy mom, right? You have how many children?
I have three. My oldest Cade is 16. He was diagnosed with Down syndrome about 6 hours after he was born. So I was 26 at the time, and you can imagine that just kind of changed my direction and trajectory on what motherhood even would look like for me. Then 2 years later, I had a boy named Pierce, and he's my feeler. He thinks he feels first and thinks second, just like me, which I love. And then my youngest, Kennedy, is almost 12. So 2 boys and a girl, and she's the boss of all of us. So she's
sweet. Love it.
Yes, very much so. My husband and I, Gabe, have been married. This is our 20-year anniversary this year. So
congrats.
Kind of remarkable to look at each other and say we still love each other and like each other most days. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. That's great. Congrats on 20 years. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can understand about that. I mean, just from seeing one of my cousins who I'm really close to, her child was diagnosed with Downs, and that just took a turn, and I think she was going to have maybe more children, but I think it can be very overwhelming.
It changed our world. I think what I've learned so much about even my faith through Cade and our family on speaking for those who can't always speak for themselves and being an advocate for them, and then learning from them in the way of just an openness of kindness to anyone and everyone. I mean, he kind of walks in a room and just passes out hugs like hotcakes, or everything is always worth dancing about, and just the generosity of spirit that he brings to the room. Yeah. Everyone feels it. And so I'm very grateful.
Yeah. And he's 16. And does he attend school?
Yes, he started a local high school this year, and he's going to the Best Buddies prom tomorrow night.
Oh, fun.
With a date.
Yeah.
It's so so funny. Oh my goodness. Yeah, he's all dressed. In fact, they're going to come over here for pictures before they head out tomorrow night. It's so surreal.
Yeah. Your boy's growing up. He's growing
know.
up. Oh.
No.
And is this
And
a girlfriend? I mean, like just a friend or?
just a friend.
Yeah.
She's his buddy at school. So they do a lot of like they offer different programs after school, like bowling or just if it's a holiday they'll do a party, and so they're going together. There's a whole group of them.
Yeah. My son is in high school as well, and their Best Buddies program sells cookies like during the day. Like I think they take turns, or maybe it's just a one club or one part of their organization that gets together and they sell cookies. I mean, and I think the whole school buys at least one. I know my son probably buys 3 a day.
Right.
But
Right.
it just smells. I walk in, it's, I'm like, oh no, how do these kids study with these chocolate chip cookies, smells in the air. So it's a great program, and I love that they have that. So yeah, it's really good. So that'll be exciting. Are they going in a limo?
No, I think they're all kind of riding together in like a smaller bus kind of idea, because it's downtown and we're in Franklin. So, and it's at Bridgestone Arena. It's like no small thing. It's a huge,
so
thousands
it's
of kids.
The big one.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's gonna be fun. Wow. Yeah, downtown is it's good. They're gonna have some people driving them down there, and wish somebody would drive me downtown.
Right.
I went downtown. For those of you who don't know, parking is crazy in Nashville.
Right.
Just, I would say Uber all the way. So, yeah.
I tend to do that airport runs. It just makes it less stressful.
Yes. Yeah. So tell me about this book. How long did it take you to write? This is, a business podcast, and I have a lot of authors, and I have a lot of listeners that are author wannabes or just they're writers as well. So tell me about your writing process with this latest book, You Are Free.
Sure. Well, the thing with writing is sometimes you write. A lot of my friends I've asked this question to, like, what do you prefer, the writing or the public speaking? Because sometimes they go hand in glove, even though you weren't planning on that happening. And so I have a lot of friends who will just say, the writing is my first love. It comes effortless. It pours out. I can just sit at a computer for hours and it lands on the page. And then there's others who say, I feel most comfortable when I can have all the nonverbal helping me communicate something, and I have the dynamic of an audience, responding back to me in real time. And so it's interesting because if you strictly write, you can probably put out a book faster because just sheer capacity, right? But when I wrote Free Fall, I never planned to speak publicly on it beyond just sharing about the story, on a short little tour that was East Coast and West Coast between New York and LA, and didn't really have a vision for anything beyond that. And quickly that turned into just more invitations, partly because I was just really vulnerable, just sharing the story. And I think people do connect with story. That's kind of what invites them into feeling their story within yours or discovering. And so it took on this season of speaking that I just was not really prepared for, but I loved. I wound up realizing, my first love is probably the speaking, because I love just sharing things in real time. So the discipline for me, honestly, and the muscle is the writing. Even though I love the writing, it doesn't come as effortlessly. I really work hard at the editing and have a team that helps me with the editing, because if you only do this every couple years, or for me every 4 years or 3, you want to make sure you give it everything you have in that project, because once it's in print, it's kind of it's out there. It's there.
Right.
So I think for me, it was more just finding the balance between slowing the speaking schedule enough to really have the time and energy to invest in writing it well. And so I had a pretty solid schedule for 3 years. And even this past year, I just started saying no to more things because I knew that getting on a plane every Thursday or Friday of each week in the spring and fall was not serving the season of writing well. And so, I think for anyone, it's just know your strengths, and then know the things that don't come quite as effortless, then to carve out larger blocks of time and space to get that where you want it to be. And so that's what this last year was for me. It was very much heavily focused and concentrated in the writing itself, because I had already delayed the release once, and I thought, okay, Rebekah, you know that you're passionate about this message. You share on it every weekend. You need to be able to articulate this in book form, because there are going to be plenty of people who are never going to be able to, you're not going to be able to stand in front of and share. So develop this muscle and work hard at that and give it the time that it deserves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I can totally relate, because I feel like I process and am best with talking, and speaking, even though I'm not a speaker per se. I do this podcast, but I don't call it, a speaker like you're a speaker. But I do, I think I'm more gifted in that. And I don't know, I just kind of relate more and process more and get things out a little bit better. And have you heard Brene Brown, the way she did her last book, where she brought in like a group of her friends and sort of talked about her research and what she was kind of going for and what she was looking for. And I thought that was really cool too. And I think she even recorded it maybe, or had someone write down some things, or then she would go and write things down. And to me that process made sense, because I feel like when you're speaking, you're saying, like, I don't know if you find this to be true, but you'll speak and then you'll be like, oh my gosh, that was really good. I should have written that down,
Right. Very much so. Yes.
Yeah.
And I love that idea. I didn't know that about Brene, but it makes total sense, because people like you and I, or Brene, if we're verbal processors, it means we actually need to verbalize the idea before we write it down.
Yeah.
And in part, I think it's just personality. It's not, one's not right and one's not wrong. It's just what comes more natural for you. And for me, it's definitely the ability to articulate what's inside. Mm-hmm. And I often have to say that out loud before I can put it on a page.
Mm-hmm. I use my notes app or Evernote and just kind of dictate to myself sometimes when I have something interesting to say.
And I found what was helpful for me on this last one is that my editorial team was on a group Vox. And that's a verbal thing, and you can upgrade and get it so that it's private and all that. But it was verbal and helpful to just even articulate things that you were sensing, even in that form, because you could re-listen to it or, be reminded of it or get it dictated. So there are lots of tools these days, thankfully, with technology to help that process get a little smoother.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you say that your love is speaking, and I just watched you recently at the If Gathering, and as I was preparing this morning, I was thinking, she's so smooth. Like you're a great speaker, very calm, and just, I don't know, it just seemed to flow very naturally. So I can see where, that you're comfortable in that role. However, I just heard, read that you had an issue with anxiety at some point.
Oh yeah.
Was that a long time ago? And
No, I mean, yes, that really, the story is more highlighted in the first book, Free Fall to Fly. I developed panic disorder about 4 months into my move to New York City. And so I would have panic attacks daily almost on planes or trains or elevators or crowds, which of course, if you move to New York, you know you can't avoid those things. And so it
Right.
began a season of desperation, of kind of feeling small and swallowed up and discouraged, even despair that this was the new normal. And there was a little bit of anxiety in my family, or even just a mild depression in some of my family. And so part of it was just like, well, this must be my thing, and this is surfacing now, and how will I navigate this? Because it was new for me at midlife, mid 30s. And then in that desperation of a panic attack, some people have anxiety and some people have panic disorder where it escalates to the point where you're so fearful that you have to escape. It might birth out of claustrophobia, but it's this feeling like if I don't escape, I'm going to die. And it's not true. It's not true, but your mind and your body and your adrenaline cannot calm down, and you feel completely out of control. And so that lasted about 18 months and culminates to a moment where I just 3 a.m. in the morning just cry out, rescue me, deliver me. I cannot do this without you. And the Lord just kind of flattened my body on the bed, and all was still. And I didn't have language for it at the time. It was in 2011. I wouldn't have called it healing. I just knew that like something shifted that day, that wow. Early hour of, and I no longer had these gripping panic attacks. It just like
Seriously.
They slowly faded. They just did. They just kind of, it was. And so I recap a little bit of that in the beginning of this new book, You Are Free. And the chapter is called Free to be Rescued, because it was the first time I really encountered a God of power that actually got in the middle of my mess and started to show me, the places he wanted to set me free. And so I wanted to start with that just reminder for people who might not have read that book, but I know so many women face this in various forms. And part of it fundamentally goes back to is like, do we believe that God sees and that he cares? And if so, are we willing to invite him into our pain? And just by that cry out, I think it became an invitation for him to get real intimate with all my fears or all my worries, no matter what. It might have taken the desperation of a panic moment to realize that, hey, I want you to be integrated into every decision I make as a mother and a wife, as an entrepreneur, as a writer, as a speaker, whatever my call is or my assignment is. I don't want to do another day without you. And so that's really kind of where this last 3 years have gone. Just this continued reliance on him and his strength and his provision. And like we were just talking about being verbal processors, I think that really comes in handy when it comes to prayer, because I'll get up super early, not because I'm disciplined, but just because I can't sleep any longer. And I'll go out often in the living room when everyone's still asleep, and I'll just start talking out loud to God, like what's going on? Here are the fears that I'm feeling. Sometimes it's just a moment of gratitude and I'm just sharing a grateful heart. But, if I'm honest, there's also areas of longing or lostness or just fatigue, plain old fatigue from just the pace sometimes, and then sometimes there's just a cry for stillness and like, help me know how to sustain what you've asked me to do, and help me know how to lay down what I've offered or volunteered to do that I shouldn't be doing. And so part of that verbal processing has been so sweet in that, communion with God.
Yeah, that's amazing that you are able to use your gifting, like we were talking about, and just share it out loud and have that time. What a sweet time.
Yeah.
Well, and so you are an entrepreneur, you are a businesswoman. So what are some of the things that you, and of course do you have like a ministry that you, that's sort of your umbrella that you function through, or tell me about how your company is structured?
Sure. There's two parts, really. My husband and I co-founded this organization called Q Ideas 14 years ago, and Q stands for questions, and it came a year after Cade's birth. Like I said, when he was born and we were young, and we just thought, everything's shifted now. Mm-hmm. What we used to think was important became back burner. What we used to ignore or overlook became front and center. And I think we just decided, Lord, let our lives be ones of your purpose, not ours, and show us what that needs to look like for as many years as you give us as working adults. And so early on, he just burdened us with this idea that our faith doesn't seem like a viable option in a secular culture. It's lost credibility. It no longer really has a place at the table. And so my husband cares deeply about cultural influences. So we decided to start this thing called Q, and Q stands for questions. And we wanted to create a gathering where industry leaders in arts and media and government and policy and education in seven different channels of culture who are people who love God and are faithful, but they're serving on those front lines and don't always know how to engage the church. And then the church doesn't know how to engage the tensions of those channels. And so we created our first Q, and we began meeting in downtown city centers, theaters or performing art centers or any kind of like music studio halls. We didn't want it to be just in a church. We really wanted it to be a civic place where mm-hmm. everyone could come and learn more about the tensions of our day and what living a faithful life in the middle of that looks like. And so, as you can imagine, now it feels more critical than ever to be someone who just knows how to navigate questions of the tensions that we're facing, whether it's adoption of technology or the confusion that even surfaces around race, around the rights we have to begin or end life, or so we'll meet in different cities. And when we were in Denver, we talked about how marijuana has affected the state. We have people talk about gender dysphoria or same-sex attraction or public education. So we just kind of really want to get into the nitty-gritty in places that sometimes the church doesn't always know how to step into. And so we've done that, and obviously always welcome to check that out. But we'll do our next gathering in April in downtown Nashville at Music City Center. And it's the highlight of my cultural learning every year. So that's one.
That's awesome. What date is that?
It is April 26th through 28th. It's a Wednesday through Friday. Mm-hmm. And we meet in rounds, and we have evening experiences. There's probably about 2,000 people there. Mm-hmm. It's such a learning community. Like, thoughtful leaders and thinkers come from all around the country. And I learn more in that 3-day period than I learn all year long. It's so inspiring. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I think that's so needed because, there are some things that have happened recently, and we as believers, we don't know even how to start the conversation about some of these things and where it all fits in and where we can talk to those mm-hmm. who don't look like us and don't mm-hmm. Act like us and believe like us, but right. Yet we want to open those lines of communication.
Absolutely. Well, this is definitely a passion of my husband's.
Yeah.
His name is Lyons, and he and Dave Kinnaman, who is the leader of Barna Research Group, they always do a study every couple of years. And so they released a book a year ago called Good Faith, and it's how to be a Christian in a world that thinks you're irrelevant and extreme. And it's just, how do we navigate what does faithfulness and kindness look like mm-hmm. in moments where our ideology, our theology might look different than what others see. So mm-hmm. You're welcome to check it out. It's qideas.org, and would love to have anyone who wants to come in April. And so that's one piece of that's more the organizational side. And I work closely with that team on just the vision and future of what Q looks like. And then my personal side really comes from a team that helps me with just content that I create around this idea of freedom, of calling, of purpose and passion. I speak a lot to women's issues in general because, I'm a woman and passionate about it. I feel like there's often a void in the voice of the young evangelical woman. I feel like there's a lot of voices out there right now of the progressive woman, but not so much one who holds more of a orthodox conservative view that can navigate the both sides, though, that can understand the nuance and doesn't always feel like we fit in either box.
Right. Yeah.
As a faithful follower of Jesus, whether it's just equality of and value of all life and in all areas of the world. And so anyways, so I have a team that helps me with that, and then just handling, my schedule or writing or all those good things. I'm very grateful. Wonderful team of people.
Yeah, that's good. Your team is probably very valuable to keep you, focused and just to plan out. It's always good to kind of, as we talked about earlier, just verbalizing even schedules helps me, like, oh yeah, I do have to, and it kind of helps me kind of get geared up for the next season of my life or the next thing that I need to do. And so it helps to have someone to come back and forth and talk about it. So, well, tell me really quickly, what is your favorite app? It doesn't have to be a business app, but just what is your favorite app?
I think my most functional app is Voxer, because I have friends all over the country who sometimes you just want to do a quick check-in and connect with them. And because, again, I'm verbal and I'm driving and I'm not going to just want to do this long, windy text. Vox is, to me, the closest thing to a phone call, because you can at least reach out. You can share how you're doing, keep it under a few minutes, ask them to report, share back how they're doing. If it needs to take it offline to a phone call, then great. But it does feel like a great way to check in and not interrupt someone in a meeting or someone who can't just pick up right then, and still be able to connect more than just a text. So I love that for work purposes, and I love it for just relational purposes. And sometimes my friends just aren't on it, and I'm like, just trust me, it's worth it. Just have the notification come up like a text, like Rebekah's leaving you a message. It's like leaving a voicemail, but not.
I was addicted to it when I first started and got on Voxer and had a group of podcasters with me. And I just love to see those little dots where they're like, okay, someone's talking. Yay. I get all excited.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. It's
great for groups, and it's great for one-on-one. It's great for working with people that you work with day in and day out, and you just need a quick answer to something.
Yes.
But you don't want to interrupt a meeting or, and that's one thing I've learned as a quote unquote entrepreneur with a team is I have more people working with me than I've ever had, but they all are very niche in their gifting. So most of them are contract or free. You know what I'm saying? They're working. One might be responsible for marketing. One's responsible for social media. One might be responsible for PR. Whatever those things are, all of a sudden you've got a group of people that you're needing to engage with, and they're not all sitting in front of you. So what are the best ways to do that?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Doing Voxer. Well, really quickly, one last question. Actually, two really quick questions. I want to know if you were going to buy a shirt or a blouse, where would you go in Nashville or in the surrounding Nashville area?
Oh, that's such a good question.
I want to know.
My favorite go-to store that I don't have to think about and pretty much love everything in the store is Madewell. And I like that it's youthful. I like that it's actually youthful, but still shaped for someone who's had babies. That's helpful for me. But it still has kind of a young vibe to it, which is fun for me. I am in the 40s club, but I still like to think that I can throw on something that my daughter might want to borrow. So it's always fun. Yeah.
And
It's all
oh, go ahead.
timeless pieces. Oh, sorry. They're timeless pieces that you can layer, lots of denims or stripes, and you can dress up or down. So I
I
love
like that. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. And then the last thing is, what is your favorite Nashville restaurant?
Ooh, okay. My favorite is Bar Taco. It's in 12 South. I
Oh, yeah.
love fresh Tex-Mex. It's not really
Mm-hmm.
Tex-Mex. It's fresh Mexican, but it started actually in New England, which most people don't know. And because I lived in New York and would drive out to Connecticut, that's where it began, which is kind of fun. But then they have one in Atlanta, and now they have one in Nashville. So, and the idea of Bar Taco is that you're supposed to feel while you're eating like they have all these side doors that open up to open air. You almost want to feel like you're on vacation or at the beach somewhere.
Yes.
And it's got a real natural vibe that's indoor, outdoor friendly. So I love that. And the food's great.
Yeah, it's been packed lately just because Nashville's had a very mild winter. And so I'm sure they love it because I'm always seeing people out there. Yeah, it's a great place.
Yeah. Well, and then you
Thank
can
you.
always go to Jenny's for ice cream. So it's like a win-win.
Yes, Jenny's. What's your favorite Jenny's ice cream? Do you have one?
Oh, I don't. I don't go enough to have the same. I always want to try something new. Do you have a favorite?
Yes, it's called, I think it's called Bangkok, Thai
Oh,
Bangkok or Bangkok peanut. And it has three like flavors that hit you. First, you get
wow.
like, okay, this is peanut butter. That's the first one. The second one is like a coconutty. This is Thai. And the last one is the little chili kick. Oh,
Oh my goodness.
I
Oh, I
love
haven't
it.
had that one.
So if you see it,
Wow.
gotta get it. Or at
Love
least
it.
just taste it. Thank you so much. I know you're busy. You're on to another interview, so I don't want to keep you, but thank you so much for coming on Rising Stories. Best of luck with all of your speaking engagements. I know that we'll be watching and seeing when we can grab your book and go check it out.
Wonderful.
And I'm going to check out this the Q in Nashville.
Wonderful.
So,
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Oh my gosh, she is lovely, such a lovely person. I loved my interview with Rebekah, and I had no idea that her husband was the founder of Q, and I can't wait to find out more about it. And I didn't know a Bar Taco was a New England chain restaurant. Learn something new all the time. Anyway, if you heard something on the show that you wanted to jot down but couldn't because maybe you're driving or you're on the treadmill, no worries, because all the information about this show will be in the show notes at CorrineSandifer.com under Rising Stories Podcast. Also, don't forget to follow me on Instagram to get in on this great book giveaway. You will have until Sunday, March 5th, 2017 to enter to win. Thanks for listening and keep rising in your own story.